All right.
Welcome to the Health Detective Podcast with Roberto Parker. Join strength and conditioning expert Roberto Parker as he shares his over 35 years of experience in training athletes and helping people achieve their fitness goals. Now here's your moderator, Chris Whiting, with Coach Roberto.
Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to the Health Detective Podcast. This is a show where we dive deep into all matters health related, exercise, nutrition, rest, all of that stuff. And today we're going to be talking about something very near and dear to my heart, primarily because it's hard for me. That is mobility and flexibility. Am I right about that, Roberto?
We are right. We'll also talk a little bit about also, but yeah, it's mainly going to be about flexibility and aging and that kind of thing. Why you lose some of that flexibility.
Yeah. And for a guy like me that never had much flexibility to begin with, for me, I think it's do or die time. Like I either got to get this going or I'm just going to stiffen up and be another old man puttering around the mall. So
Yeah.
yes. So I don't know, maybe, I don't know how you want to start, maybe just starting with explaining what flexibility is, what mobility is, what stability is.
Well, there is a difference between, a lot of people confuse flexibility and mobility. You can be very flexible and not have very good mobility. However, if you're a pretty mobile person, chances are you have a pretty decent amount of flexibility. Now, flexibility is the ability to stretch, just basically to stretch in a particular range of motion. So if I bend over and I just touch my toes, and I can put my chest to my thighs, I'm pretty flexible.
Yes.
Now, when I'm mobile, that means I need to move from point A to point B to point C. I may not be able to be as effective in terms of mobilization as I was with flexing or having some flexibility. For example, you might take a person who does a lot of yoga, who typically is a very limber person. They can tie themselves in a knot practically.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that they're very effective and efficient at moving from point A to point B, like lunging or like crawling or like climbing or like jumping or like sprinting or something. They're not very mobile.
Okay.
It's always been my philosophy. I'm kind of a survivalist. I believe that we should train ourselves like our primitive ancestors lived, because you never know when you might get stranded. You never know when you might need a survival mechanism to survive. And if all you can do is have good flexibility, but you don't move very effectively, those survival mechanisms aren't going to work as well for you. You got to be able to move. You got to be able to lunge, squat, bend, twist, climb, jump, sprint. Now, just because you're flexible doesn't mean you can do those things effectively. But that's also where stability comes in. Stability is the ability to hold a certain position with your joints. So good posture. It all begins with good posture, believe it or not. Typically, people who have very poor posture do not have very good stability. Right now, you see me? Can you guys see me?
Yes. Okay. Looking good. Looking real good.
I'm sitting on a stability Swiss ball right now.
I'm
going to twist my body to my right. I'm going to twist my body to my left. Now, I might have very good mobility moving to my right and to my left. However, I have to have good stable posture in my lumbar spine in order to do that. Because if I weren't very stable, here's what I would look like twisting. See the difference?
Yes.
I'm having to bend forward a lot to compensate for my lack of stability.
Yeah. Okay.
Moving side to side like this, there's some flexibility involved here, but there's also a lot of mobility because you're changing directions. I guess that's probably the biggest difference between flexibility and mobility, is that with mobility, you're moving in a spatial area of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet in any particular area, straight, backwards, forward, backwards, side to side, 45-degree angles, rotationally. You're moving in different planes of motion, to the right, to the left, up, down, twisting around. So that's mobility. Now, you have to have good stability in order to not pull muscles, in order to be effective. Okay, so if I'm lunging, but I have to bend forward just to lunge, I don't have very good stability. I might have,
Okay.
because I'm compensating for my lack of sometimes flexibility, which can help my mobility, but I'm lacking stability.
Wow. Holy cow. So I went to a new chiropractor last week. First time I'd been to a chiropractor in like a year and a half, and he had me do some different stuff when he was assessing me. And he had me squat, and he said, you know, you've got an issue. He goes, when you squat down, he goes, you're bending really far forward to squat.
Yep.
Goes,
I've always told you that.
I know. So, but he's doing some stuff to me that's supposed to help me loosen up a little bit. I hope it works. We'll see. So that is my stability that's an issue, or is that flexibility?
Well, it's probably, my guess with you is that just from training you, you're tight in your hamstrings.
Yes.
So when you squat, because your hamstring muscle is attached to the back of your pelvis, it's probably tightening up your pelvis to where you can't really squat and sit the way you want. So you compensate by rounding your back when you're squatting.
Yes, I do.
That's called a kyphotic spine. Now, because you're lacking some mobility and flexibility in your hamstrings, it's making you compensate in terms of when you're trying to do some mobilization types of exercises. Because now, I don't know if you're, well, let me think about this. If you're lacking stability in your midsection, that could also be an issue. If you're very weak in your midsection, that could also make you bend at the waist excessively also. Now, in your case, I don't know, I've not done that thorough of a investigation on you or any sort of evaluation, but if you're lacking strength of the midsection, when you're squatting, it can cause you to throw your shoulders forward in what we call a kyphotic spine. When you're sitting down or standing, I'm just gonna, sorry about that, guys. You guys hear me now?
Yeah, sure can.
Okay, now I'm turning sideways. Okay, now if I have to bend forward like this to run my back to squat, there's probably some flexibility, mobility issues in my hips and or possibly my knees and ankles.
Okay.
A lordotic spine, which is more of a neutral spine, is like this. So when you're squatting, you want to be able to maintain that curvature in your spine as best you can. If you have to round your back to squat, chances are that there's something going on. There's something lacking with stability. Maybe it's around your midsection. Maybe your lower back is weak. Something is lacking flexibility / mobility in your hips, possibly your knees and your ankles. You know, a lot of times when I train athletes, when we go with squats, some of them lift their heels up when they squat. Okay. When they're trying to squat with the bar on their back, because they're so tight in their ankles. Their ankle flexibility is so tight, they compensate by rounding their back and shifting their knees forward, which is not good because that's hard on your knees and you have a lot of weight on your back. So yeah, there's a lot of compensation and chemistry going on with flexibility, mobility, balance, and stability. There's a lot going on there, and you can get a little bit technical here, and each person is going to be a little bit different. You might be tight in your hamstrings, which causes you to have a round back. You might be weak in your abdominals. which might causes you to have a round back. You might have, you might be very stiff in your knees, which would cause you to have a round back. And squatting and lunging are probably the two best exercises that can pretty much evaluate what type of stability, mobility you have around the midsection. And by the way, most stability and mobility problems occur around the hip area.
Wow. So I think it's self-explanatory, but just for the slower of us on this podcast, why are these three things so important?
What three things are that now? Oh, stability,
mobility, flexibility.
When I'm like this, sitting down, I have to have nice, strong abdominals to keep my posture nice and erect. Okay. Nice and straight.
Yes.
Now that's stability. When I want to go through any range of motion like squatting or lunging or bending or twisting, I have to have a degree of mobility in order to do that. But as I go to my right, see, I'm kind of bending away from me. I'll go this way. Okay. As I'm going to my right on this ball, I've got to have good stability through my midsection. Otherwise, I look like this. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I lose all strength and power. I could injure myself.
Yeah.
So there's a range of motion you want with your muscles, and there's also a certain amount of stability you want through your ligaments. And I want to talk about that just for a second. There's ligaments, there's tendons, and there's muscles. Ligaments attach bone to bone.
Okay.
Tendons attach muscles to bones. Muscles are attached typically to your joints. So you can stretch muscles very effectively if you work at it. Okay. You can also stretch tendons to a lesser degree, but you do not want to stretch ligaments. Here's the reason why. Ligaments are what we call avascular. They have very, very, very minimal blood circulation, blood flow.
Gotcha.
Okay, so when you strain a ligament, you're screwed big time, because that can pretty much change the compensation and change the integrity of your joint the rest of your life if you strain a ligament.
Yeah.
It's like an MCL or an ACL in your knee. Okay, anterior cruciate ligament and medial cruciate ligament. When you really tear those, you can do some serious damage if you're not careful the rest of your life. Now, because they are avascular, they get very minimal circulation. But ligaments are important for stability.
And again, so, ligaments bone to bone, correct?
Bone to bone.
Okay.
They're important for stability.
Now,
tendons are like kind of a combination of muscles and ligaments. Tendons attach muscles to bones. Tendons are more vascular as ligaments, but not as vascular as muscles. So when you strain a tendon, like your Achilles tendon, that's a tendon. So when you strain a tendon, it's going to take you a lot longer to recover from that than a muscle, because it's not as vascular. However, it's not avascular like a ligament. And once again, tendons are important in stability also. Not quite as much as ligaments.
Yeah.
Now, muscles are made up of sarcomeres and myofibrils, as we call it in the science world, and they attach to joints in your body. Okay, so muscles go from joint to joint and help to strengthen those joints. In other words, when you have nice, strong, lean muscles, they help the integrity of joints.
Okay.
Like your knee joint, like your back, like your hips, like your ankles.
Yeah.
So all these three entities have to work together in order to give you good health, so you can go out and perform, whether it's running, jumping, walking, climbing. Because going back to what I said before, all of us are pretty much cave people in coats and ties and blouses and dresses. We were designed to move. We were designed to crawl. We were designed to climb, to run, to escape, to hunt, and hunt prey. That's how our bodies were designed. Now, unfortunately, what happens with civilization, we became civilized, and we tend to not be as active, and those ligaments, tendons, and muscles become tight or become too loose. When ligaments become too loose, it screws up the integrity of your joint. When muscles become too weak, it screws up the integrity of your joint. When tendons become too loose and weak, it screws up the integrity of your joint. You want ligaments to be nice and strong. You want tendons to be strong. You want muscles to be strong, but have some flexibility within those muscles. Muscles you can stretch.
Yeah.
Okay. Tendons and ligaments, you can't stretch those quite as well. Tendons a little bit, but ligaments, you do not want to stretch.
Yeah.
So that's why when you see somebody, have you ever heard of the term hypermobility? You ever heard of that term? Okay. Hypermobility is typically, most women are more hypermobile than men are. Okay. You see people who are, the old term is double jointed. You ever heard that term?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay. A person who can really, almost take their finger and touch their wrist, and they're all just kind of weird contortionists almost.
Yeah.
Okay. That type of person got to be careful too, because what happens is when you become hypermobile, typically your tendons and muscles are not as strong as they should be.
Oh.
And you can damage a lot of ligaments in your body. And like I said, when you strain a ligament, they're pretty much avascular. It's like those old plastic deals you put pop cans and beer cans in. When you stretch them out, you can never get them back to the original position.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Okay?
Gotcha.
That is probably the closest analogy I can use to what ligaments are like. Okay? Ligaments help to stabilize. Tendons and muscles help to stabilize, but they're also can help with your mobility. You got to have mobilization through the muscles, but you got to have stability through the ligaments.
Now, back when I was a kid, I remember my dad would stretch. He was a runner, and he would stretch, and he would do these like bouncing stretches, like
active stretching.
Yeah. So my question on that is, then years later, he read somewhere, oh, you're not supposed to bounce when you stretch. You're only supposed to lean. But now you have me do active stretch. So can you explain a little bit the difference between active stretching and other types of stretching, and when maybe they could or should be used?
Okay, good question. Active stretching is like I have you and Jane do when you do leg swings. That's active stretching. Active stretching is, let's just say, swing your arms back and forth like this. Okay, active stretching is good for warming up. So I'm going to use workouts, for example. Okay. Whenever you do a workout, you want to warm up prior to the workout more than you stretch.
Okay.
Now, why do I say that? Because when you stretch a cold muscle, you got to be careful, because you can tear a muscle or tear a tendon.
Gotcha.
It's like your muscles are like rubber bands. Okay. If I were to put a rubber band into the freezer overnight, get up in the morning and do this, what would happen?
It'd probably snap.
It'd break. Okay. Now, if I let the rubber band out in the heat all day long, like today, and I did that, what would happen, you think?
It'd probably stretch really, really far.
That is analogous to active stretching.
Okay.
Okay. You want to warm up the muscles and the tendons of your body. Okay. Yeah. Now, after the workout, that's pre-workout, by the way, active stretching. Post-stretch or post-workout, now you want to do more passive type of stretching, the type of stretching that Jane loves to do.
So you're sitting on the floor with your legs spread and just bending forward and holding it. Gotcha.
Because now you want the muscles to try to relax and to calm down a little bit. Prior to the workout, you want more circulation. You want more nerve innervation. You want to get the heart rate going. You want the core temperature elevated. You're not going to do that with just sitting down and stretching for 30 seconds in one position.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So you want to get the muscles and the tendons and ligaments warmed up before you do your workout.
Yeah.
That's one reason. That's kind of the concept behind heat yoga, the Bikram yoga.
Uh-huh.
Okay, is to warm everything up. Now, post workout is now when you want to do more of the yoga type of stretching. You want to hold it for a minute or however long you want to do. You can do your medication and, hum and chant and everything else. So, so that's when you want to get into more the yoga type of stretching. Now, there is a program that I do like. I do like Pilates.
Uh-huh.
Pilates is more of a combination of power movements and yoga. That's more active type of movements. So, there's active stretching like I have you guys do.
Yeah.
You can also add weight to it. So if I have you stand up and have a dumbbell in each hand and do this,
Mm-hmm.
then forward like that. Now we're adding some weight to it. That's more power type stretching. If I have a medicine ball in my hand right now, I go side to side once again, getting back to mobility. I'm also adding some strength and power to that. So you can do some combination of strength / mobility type movements, or you can just do pure stretching type movements.
Wow. So I'm guessing there's a lot of folks that listen to this podcast who have jobs like me where they're sitting down most of the time. And we have talked in the past about, get up, get active every so often. You talked about doing some push-ups or some squats. Are there any types of stretches or anything that you would recommend folks that are sitting a lot do?
Yeah, I can't demonstrate it now, but you put the ball against the wall like this, lean against the wall, and you do some squats and squat down low as you can. That helps to stabilize your back so you don't have a lot of leaning forward. Just sometimes just deep air squats where you go as low as you can without lifting your heels up. Some other things you can do, just lean back on the ball like this, stretch your back. I call these good morning stretches because you wake up in the morning and every time, when you sleep at night in your bed, your back tends to stiffen up a little bit. So you want to get up in the morning and kind of wake up your spine. So that's like mobility of the spine, because the spine is mainly made out of ligamentous type of tissue. So you want to kind of wake up the spine a little bit by doing some good Swiss ball stretching. You can do that. I recommend getting a ball to sit on at your office if your employer will allow you to do that. Sometimes just hanging from a bar to help stretch out your back, your thoracic spine, your lumbar spine. Do some lunging, some body weight lunging, sometimes with just a forward lean into it. You help stretch the back and the hips. Sometimes just lunging with your back straight in order just to kind of activate the glutes more. So there's all different ways you can do it. You can change the angle of the different type of movement patterns you're doing because that engages different types of muscles. So, to kind of put it in one big bow here, mobility is this pretty much, okay? Think about this. I used to talk about the 4 components of athletic performance, and I'll call it the 4 components of any performance for any human being: strength, flexibility, mobility, balance, and coordination. So mobility, in my opinion, is the ability to move in any multiple directions, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet in one direction, going at various angles, various planes of motion.
Okay.
Also with the ability to hold good posture, which is good stability, have coordination to where you don't trip and fall over yourself, and have good balance to where you don't trip and fall over yourself. That, in a nutshell, to me, is mobility. Now, flexibility is just the ability to bend over and touch your toes, or the ability to, take your hands and grab your hands behind your back. That's more flexibility, which is still good to have, but it's not always the most functional. Just because you're flexible doesn't mean that you're functional. and that's probably the operative word I really want to use here. How functional are you when it comes to your flexibility, mobility, strength, balance, and coordination? So if you, just because you go to the gym and you're stretching all the time, doesn't mean that you're functional. Just because you lift weights all the time doesn't mean you're functional. Just because you run 8 miles a day doesn't mean you're functional. You've got to do some other things to challenge different systems of the body, different dynamics of how the body works.
Yeah.
Follow me?
Yes.
Okay, because if you become so one-sided in what you're doing, the body, believe it or not, becomes too adaptive to what you're doing. And then when you go do something different, you hurt yourself. But once again, we talked about this all the time. You go to the airport, you pick up your luggage out of the carousel there, and you blow your back out.
Yeah.
Why? Because all you've been doing is running. All you've been doing is maybe stretching. And yeah, you might be flexible enough to pick up the luggage, but maybe your back muscles are weak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. You might be flexible, but you might be weak as hell.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You might be strong as hell, but you also may not have the mobility in order to move very well.
Gotcha.
So getting to wrap it up once again here, coming to a person like myself, that's where I would do some sort of an evaluation on you to determine how well you could move in different planes of motion, excuse me, and how flexible you are and how mobile you are, what type of coordination you have, and what type of strength you have.
Yes. And I think, for people that are listening, considering working with someone, you could tell me if I'm wrong, but flexibility, mobility, stability, if you ignore those as you're aging, you're going to be more likely to get injured,
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because as you age, your joints get tighter, because we have in our joints produce this fluid called synovial fluid, which helps to lubricate joints in the body.
Uh-huh.
Well, as we age, we start to lose that fluid.
Oh.
Okay. Now, how can you make up for that? By stretching, by doing more active stretching, and by doing some passive stretching. Both are important, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Both are very important. Active stretching and passive stretching, in addition to doing the right type of, I call it 3-dimensional strength training and balance training and timing and coordination. So when you're doing strength work, make sure you're working all planes of motion, moving forward, moving backward, moving side to side, moving rotationally.
Yeah.
When you're doing flexibility work, do all three. Which I'll bring this point on one more. I just thought of this. You might be flexible in one plane of motion, like bending over to touch your toes like this. You might be very flexible, but you're not very flexible when it comes to twisting and like this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I was a baseball player, training a baseball player, he might be very flexible, or a softball player, to touch his or her toes, but if they can't swing a bat because they're too tight when they do rotational movement, what good are they?
Yeah, no good. That's
exactly what. So you might be very adept in moving in one plane of motion, but you might be very not very adaptive in moving in various other planes of motion. Now, most exercises that you see in a gym are what we call sagittal plane motions. We've talked about this before, I think, in the past. Sagittal plane is where you just, everything is straight ahead. Bench press, overhead press, lat pull down, squats.
Yeah.
Those are sagittal planes. Frontal plane motions are things where you go side to side, shoulder flies, that kind of thing. Rotational motions are rotation, or I should say transverse plane motions, I should say, where you twist side to side like this. You're twisting.
Oh, wood choppers.
Yeah, exactly. So you once again, you might be very, very adept at moving in one plane of motion and very weak in moving in other planes of motion. And that's where you can hurt yourself, because those tendons, ligaments, and muscles are not communicating like they should.
Well, and that's where going to you is great, because I belong to a gym. I don't go there often, but in the past I have, and you'll see people come in about the same time you do, and they just do the same thing every time. They're on the treadmill or the elliptical for 30 minutes and they leave, or they do 20 minutes of elliptical and then they go do a bench press machine and they leave. And you're not hitting all of those areas when you do that. And that's where it's great to come to you, because I don't have to think, but I know that I will be doing different stuff every time, which is great. And and that's just the workout portion. You also help folks with their nutrition, with their, what the food they eat, as well as their macro and micronutrients and all of that. So tell the nice people at home how they can get in touch with you if they do want to work with you.
Well, you can call me. My phone number is 816-405-7703. That's my number. Email is rwpsports@yahoo.com. I will run a complete metabolic assessment on you, where we look at your blood type, we look at your neuromuscular type, we look at your neurotransmitters, we do some questionnaires on you to see what type of lifestyle you have, and we come up with a metabolic assessment based on that. We can also do a biomechanical assessment too, which is kind of what we talked about tonight, where I can take you through some various physical range of motion exercises and get an idea of, are you stable? Are you not stable enough? Are you mobile? Are you not mobile enough for your shoulders, for your hips, for your knees, for your elbows, for your wrists? Because all of those areas I just mentioned, like for example, the shoulders tend to be more mobile. Hips tend to be more stable and mobile. Knees tend to be more stable. Elbows tend to be more stable. Wrists tend to be more mobile. Now, that doesn't mean that just because your hips tend to be more stable, you should ever work on mobility, because you should. Because in your case, you're probably tight in your hips.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Okay. You're too tight in your hips. You need to work on more hip mobility. And I might train another person who's very, very loose in their hips, and their hips need to be more stable. They need to do more lunging, more squatting, and those sort of things. So, but there's some people who are just different, the way they're built biomechanically, the way their bodies function internally, biochemically. All of us are so different.
Yeah. And that's what I love, that you don't have this one size fits all, that you truly dig into what's happening with that individual and tailor a program for them. So,
right.
Yeah, seriously, folks, if you are interested at all, give Roberto a call or shoot him an email. He'll let you know what he can do for you. And
I'm also on Instagram, so you can check me out there. I'm also on Twitter, so you can also check me out there. So,
well, there you have it. There you have it, folks. If you can't find Roberto, it's your own fault, because he's everywhere. So check him out. Check him out on Instagram, on Facebook. You've got his phone number, for crying out loud. So blow his phone up with text. But seriously, you're worth it. You're worth it. You deserve it. Give this a shot. Talk to Roberto. He could help you out. Hey, Roberto, thanks again, as always. Really appreciate you sharing all that you know with us.
Sure, man. And I will see you all tomorrow morning.
I'll be there, 6 a.m.
All right, brother.
Woo!
God bless.
God bless.
See you, Paul.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Health Detective Podcast with Roberto Parker. You can contact Roberto at 816-405-7703 or by email at rwpsports@yahoo.com with any comment or question you may have. Join us next time for the Health Detective Podcast with Roberto Parker. The Health Detective Podcast with Roberto Parker has been a KCTK production, produced by Roberto Parker, Chris Whiting, and Paul Lavoda. All rights reserved. For more information and content, email us at kctkradio@gmail.com.